Hi there, and welcome to Be a Global Citizen, the podcast that explores the concept of global citizenship through the lens of value-creating education. My name is Scott Bauer, and I'm a SOCA researcher and educator. I hope you find the discussions, stories, and insights on this podcast to be valuable and inspiring as we strive to become global citizens who are committed to living a contributive life. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. This is Scott, and I wanted to say I have big news. Today marks 5 years since I started this podcast, and I honestly can't believe it. Time's just flown by, and I wanted to take a little bit of time today on November 18th to reflect a little bit together with all of you about the ups and the downs, about what all has happened in terms of not only the people that I've invited on the podcast, but also the major takeaways and learning moments for myself. Because it just feels like the right time to do this. And I really wanted to share these open reflections with all of you. And also big shout outs to my guests who've joined me on this journey. To all of you listeners, thank you so much listening in from different parts of the world. I really appreciate you tuning in and just being curious and engaging in whatever way feels right. And also a big shout out to my mom, because it kind of really started with just, I think, a listenership of one. And I always joke with my mom. I told her in the beginning, if this listenership remains at one for any longer, I'm probably gonna have to stop because I don't want this just to be me, creating content for one person. So very fortunate that that was not the case, and yet she continues to give me ongoing feedback, and so yes, much appreciation for mom. And then, for those of you who found value in listening to these conversations with amazing educators from all different walks of life and different parts of the world, if that is something that you really value and enjoy listening to, please consider leaving a review on Spotify or Apple Podcast. I really can't emphasize this enough. It really helps in terms of getting distribution out there. And it's not, for me, it's never been about trying to get a huge listenership. But I do think that in the same way that it resonates with you, the content, it could resonate with others and hopefully inspire not only other educators doing the work, but those who maybe are not within the education space, but still interact, right, with those around them, influence others. And I think the scope of what it means to be a global citizenship must extend beyond just educators themselves. So without further ado, I wanted to, again, kind of share a little bit more in terms of reflection about kind of where it all started, what were some of the origins of this podcast, and then kind of share maybe some of the like ways in which I've grown as a podcaster. Perhaps this might be interesting to those who want to start a podcast themselves. I have a few updates as far as, recent conferences that I've attended that I think would be very interesting, kind of showcasing, wow, like maybe in the form of like a capstone. What did I learn? And how did I share that with a community of, educators in different university contexts and also organizational contexts. And then finally, just, what's the future? Am I going to continue doing this or not? Stay tuned. I'll tell you. But yeah, let's kind of rewind the timeline. Go back to where it started. 5 years ago, it was the pandemic, and I would say, kind of, at a very critical point where I think it was really evident from, just all the news reports. It was like setting in that this was something that everyone had to take very, very seriously. I know that when initially, right, news kind of spread where, regardless of where you were, it was very evident that lockdowns were starting to happen in March of 2020. I felt that when I was living in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I was working there as a teacher, and it didn't feel real. There was still this shock. I feel like, is this really happening kind of situation? And we were all working remotely. And I would say, after a couple months, it started to, really sink in that like this was happening. And then there became this kind of feeling of dread that like, when will this end? And, um, I think by the time I finally had the courage to post my first episode, it really came as a response to what I was feeling, just generally speaking, of like complete and utter disempowerment about, well, what am I supposed to do beyond just showing up and logging into my Zoom account to give a class to my students? What does the future look like moving forward from here? And so it really helped. This podcast served as kind of like way to ground me in something that I felt would be important, right, to share with others. So what that important thing was, as you all know, the title of this podcast is global citizenship, and I really wanted to just leave some kind of like record, right, that I can point back to and say, you know what, like even though the pandemic was overwhelming and difficult and terrifying in many ways for all different peoples, um, here's an action that I took. So I really wanted to leave some kind of mark in that way. So the pandemic, of course, was this big moment of upheaval and change, and that's what started the podcast. But interestingly, there's just been a succession of other big changes and upheavals in my life that also kind of, forced me to really think about the purpose of the podcast as a form of anchoring me. And that next big change for me was in 2021, towards the end of 2021. So I'd already been doing this podcast thing for, pretty much like a year at that point. And it became very clear that my time in Brazil was coming to an end. And I say that because I had been working at the same school in Sao Paulo, Brazil, for almost 6 years at that point. And I felt that I had, set out to work at this school for a very specific reason, right? It was to teach English initially, but also to bring more international perspective, right? Given that I am not from Brazil, and there were others who joined me in this moment of a big change for the school. They were rolling out an international curriculum through the International Baccalaureate program. They also were, moving to a brand new school location, as well as introducing the first year of the high school, because they had only had from kindergarten up to middle school at that point. A lot of big things. And so I felt like my mission was to support them in those changes and establish some kind of baseline as far as the international culture of like, what does it mean to speak both Portuguese and English in that kind of environment, to really invite them to consider what does it mean to not just travel abroad, but also to interact with people from abroad, and to get curious about learning, right, from those who are different from us. A lot of things that resonate with global citizenship. But I felt, I had achieved my mission after that period of time of like big change for the school, and kind of felt, well, what else is there for me to do? What other kind of environments can I learn from? And so I'd already been thinking about that for some time. I didn't feel fully satisfied with where I was at least professionally within my career. And then I guess what kind of, tipped me over the edge in terms of needing to make a change came with a relationship that I had in Brazil that I thought, right, was going to, actually keep me in Brazil for, I don't know, forever. And ultimately, caused me to reevaluate, like where we both were at in terms of our lives, and how there felt this great, like the widening gap between us. And of course, I think, and from me, the stubbornness to see that until it got too heavy, where I couldn't bear it anymore and had to admit, I don't think this is going to work out. It was very, very difficult. And ultimately, I made the decision to move back to California, which is where I'm originally from. So a lot of change, a lot of upheaval. And so, in the midst of all of that, I still had this podcast. I still was trying to post episodes on a somewhat regular basis. And I figured, you know what? Like, I don't know again where this is heading, but I think now is a good moment for me to really connect with as many people as possible. And I didn't think as deeply about it back then as I am now. But I think when I was kind of transitioning back and I found myself in a different job, here in California, I was now working at a university doing administration in the Office of Admissions. I kind of, in a way, didn't know fully who I was anymore because I had been a teacher for so long, and we put labels on ourselves as far as like this is me, and this is kind of, like in a nutshell, like, people can understand that. But now I suddenly found myself outside of that and was really trying to like grapple with, well, now is my new title university admin? Is that what it's become? And then I was doing these efforts of like connecting with other people. And, I really tried my best to embrace this sense of like, well, I don't really know who I am. So I'm literally putting myself back together. And through these conversations, hoping to glean more insight, not only into what their beliefs were and what their understanding of global citizenship was, but in a way, through those interactions, seeing how their responses back to me would help me to like understand, like on a deeper level, why am I doing this work? And I think it's often said, right, like people like with whom you associate with can better reflect who you actually are. And so in a way that was the kind of mirror that I was holding up to all of my different friends within my network to really understand, wow, like who is Scott and why does Scott believe he's a global citizen, right? How audacious of Scott, but yet I just felt like I need to just keep moving forward. So, more changes were going to happen. And most of it involved career changes as well as me going into another grad program. And I felt, again, this sense that like I don't know if my label is university admin, and also what else is out there for me to really learn as far as kind of becoming an educator who can empathize with the struggles of other educators in many different backgrounds, right? Be that public schools, private schools, nonprofits, right? I really wanted to kind of put myself in new situations. And so that's kind of what led me to kind of, in a way, bounce around from one job to another, holding multiple jobs at the same time, all the while starting a new grad program through Harvard, and then having access to an even wider network of amazing educators with whom I would then ask to be on my podcast. And yeah, and again, it just kind of continued to build, right? This kind of like snowball effect, where my network continued to grow, right? The friendships along with it, but also a deepening sense of purpose, right? As far as why is this podcast even existing, right? Again, I wasn't it was not for the purposes of going viral and fandom, right? It was really, I think, just me grappling with how am I to make sense of all of these changes happening in my life. And so that kind of catches us up to this moment where I'm thinking, wow, 5 years. So just kind of, snap my fingers, and now here we are. But there has been quite an evolution of the podcast, from when I started to now. Various different kind of like check marks, I guess you could say, in terms of my approach to the podcast, my understanding of what it means to be a podcaster. There was also some reluctance on my part of like putting a label of like, yeah, I guess I'm a podcaster now. This imposter syndrome is real. And yeah, and then like what did I actually, like what is my current understanding of the podcast at this moment. These are all things that are kind of, circling around in my head, and I'm trying to kind of put down into words for all of you today. So I think, as I've kind of already made clear, right, through all of the ups and downs, twists and turns, from uh, November 18th, 2020 until now, I think the the podcast has really been an anchoring for me. It's allowed me to connect to some deeper roots of mine that do tie back to my my Buddhist faith, that also connect back to my alma mater, which is where I did my undergrad at Soka University of America, which, for those of you watching, is the shirt that I'm wearing. So I feel like, in moments of yeah, you know, change, it's very easy to kind of lose sight of really, like, who you are, or really to believe in, like, the values of, like, this is kind of what got me to this point. So yeah, connecting to my roots have been very important, along this journey. And then also, I initially started with more of, like, kind of like this format, me just talking into a microphone and hoping that someone is actually out there listening besides my mom. And it felt good to start off that way. But there was a little bit of a teacher mindset of, like, oh, I need to kind of explain, in a very, in a way that kind of goes from, like, one topic to the next, and just lay out, this is what global citizenship is. I got to a point where I thought, well, actually, I don't know how interesting this is. But also, who am I to say anything definitive about this topic? Why not extend this dialogue to more people? And then this thought of, let me just have guests come here to share their thoughts, emerged. And I thought that was awesome. So, it then became more of a networking tool, and also, an opportunity for me to hone my own skill as a podcaster who deeply listens to others, and also strives to connect with others and meet them where they're at. And all the while just through the voice. And I think that's, something that, even how I speak, has changed. I like to think that I've gotten a little bit more confident, and I think that reflects in my voice. If you go back to some of the initial conversations, there probably is a little bit of, like, kind of like wavering of my voice, of, I'm not really sure, and uh, self-doubting myself and all this stuff. So I like to think that it has improved in that way, in terms of, like, my confidence. And then I would say the last part of this evolution of the podcast has really been, through one-to-one connections with various different guests, people that I invite, right? Um, it it has gotten to a point now with, almost 200 episodes, and I think out of those 200, over 160 have been, conversations with guests. It now, I can confidently say, has become a community, community of educators, a community of global citizens who are out there making impact. And I think that really, that really strikes me as something of value, right? That we need communities of like-minded individuals who are out there doing the work, and who are striving to create a better world, right, for future generations. And all of that kind of leads me to, this moment where, yeah, I've amassed all these different conversations, and connecting with different peoples, and then I had some opportunities, recently. One of them over the summer, and then the second one, just, a couple of weeks ago, actually, where I was able to share out, some specific insights and takeaways that I had. So I wanted to share that now with you. So there's, the DePaul, conference, this international conference on Ikeda Soka studies. And I had done my first master's, through DePaul University back in 2018. Um, and, I've been supporting and attending and presenting at this conference, since then. And this last conference in August, I had the opportunity to share out um, some of the takeaways that I've had inviting my classmates from Harvard onto my podcast. So I thought that, hey, here's a group of individuals that are all coming from like different education backgrounds. Some of them are kindergarten teachers, others are high school teachers, some of them are university professors, others work in nonprofits and do grant writing, some work at Sesame Street and have more artistic aims. Some are writers, so many different backgrounds, and yet all of them speak to global citizenship in very similar ways, right? That I wanted to have rooted in their own personal experiences. One of the things that I really kind of found fascinating were these shared values of interconnectedness, empathy, and just having a global perspective. I think there's many more that I can use to kind of describe what these conversations were really speaking to, but I think that it really kind of comes down to them having this deeper commitment to helping others. It's not just about them. It's always about how they can be of service to those around them, and how they can, through their work, make impact for future generations. And I find that to be so heartwarming and so badly needed in the world that we currently live in. And so I wanted to kind of bring those voices up and really kind of distill some of the conversations that I've had in a format where people at this conference could understand, wow, okay, there might be something to some of these like specific values, and yeah, and also kind of thinking about the ways in which those values are not so different from maybe their own, right? So they can kind of resonate with those, and this is just like a sample, of many, many different educators out there. So that was like the first conference. The second conference was the International Conference on Transformative Education. This was hosted by the Global Citizen Foundation. What a appropriately named organization for someone like me to want to like participate in. I do have to thank Professor Maria Guajardo for being so gracious to allow me to be one of the presenters. And I took this opportunity as a presenter to really emphasize the power of one's voice, right? Given that podcasting is primarily just my voice, although some of you might be seeing a video of me. Either way, there's the emphasis on one's voice conveying not only the message, right, the content of what you want to say, but I think more so the spirit behind it, right? How you connect with the tonality of it, right? The warmth of the voice, and how that kind of brings you in and makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel inspired, makes you wonder and ask questions about what really is at play. And all of that, that I shared about in terms of like the way I approach podcasting, was to hopefully it's inspired the attendees to really think about, what is the one thing that they truly care about? Who is the community that could really benefit from hearing about and learning about that one thing? And then what is the kind of impact that you're hoping to make? All of that can be done through a podcast, through your voice. But, voice can be abstracted to be more than just sound, right? I think it can be conveyed in so many other artistic ways, right? Through movement, it could be through writing. I think it could be through gestures, right? The actions that we do. But, there's so much more I think that we can do to kind of empower ourselves to have that kind of positive influence on others. But it needs to be anchored in something that truly feels like this is my purpose. So I really emphasized that during my talk at the International Conference on Transformative Education, because podcasting can be thought of as a transformative technology, and the world needs to hear more people's true passions, because I think that's when we get on that level of like what we're passionate about, people really start to light up. And this kind of illuminating effect of someone who's really passionate is it's what's going to help dispel a lot of the darkness that we see in the world around us. Okay, so now, last part. Thank you, those of you who are sticking with this and listening to me just rant on, or reflect and just go on a rant about my podcast. But thank you. And the last part is really like, well, what's the future, right? Well, am I going to continue doing this, or am I going to just kind of say that was enough and kind of move forward? Um, I I will say that my determination is to continue. So maybe those of you were like anticipating this, like, where's he going with this? And then, okay, great. He's still going to continue. So thank you for that. Your concern is much appreciated. And I wanted to say that, it's just been so gratifying being able to collect stories of really inspiring educators. I want to connect with more. And it's just always so heartfelt when I'm able to have this genuine connection with those who, they're doing the work, but the work is difficult. And if this conversation that I have with them can inspire them or encourage them to continue doing what they're doing, then I feel like my job, is done. That's a big part of it. But I do think, though, I want to find ways to really reach other people. And part of that, I think, will require me to refresh the brand and also some of the content, that I do. I feel like the one-to-one long-form conversations will continue. But I want to think of ways in which I can bring in more content that will be of interest to more people and kind of bring them in to the community and get them thinking about a lot of the bigger questions as far as how can we make impact in this world, and not just kind of tie it to specific professional kind of action items, but also like the deeper personal kind of values that root us in the work. So I'm not entirely sure what all of that is, but I will be taking a little bit of time in December, and maybe a little bit of January too, to really think more deeply about what it is that I want to put out there in terms of the content. I would love to hear feedback from any of you. And that also, like, how you reach out. Part of it will be through establishing more of like a social media presence, and then hopefully later down the line, even a website. So please, stay tuned. I'll be sure to share what specific links and what kind of like social media handles you can reach out to. But I will say, at least at this moment, the best way to show your support, and I'll say it again because I don't say it nearly enough, simply leaving a review. And so if you've gotten to this point and you're still listening, thank you. And that shows that you really are invested in the podcast. And it does not take more than a minute, maybe even less if it's on Spotify. I think you just click like, the stars. But, this is something that will help the algorithm, really suggest this content to even more people. And so please take this time to just leave a review, say a few nice things. That would be nice. Thank you. But yeah, it really does help. And thank you so much again for just, being a part of this, listening, sharing with others. And I'm excited about what the next, 5 years look like for the podcast, because I'm trying to really think about ways in which this can grow, and ways it could be even more interactive for those of you listening, so that we can all continue to be inspired and do the work, and really be that much more confident about proclaiming from a mountaintop that we are global citizens, but not just in name, but truly in the actions that we do on a day-to-day basis. So with that, thank you so much. Happy 5-year anniversary to be a global citizen. And it's been such a wonderful journey. I really appreciate those of you listening to this reflection of mine, and can't wait what the future holds for this podcast and for this community. So thank you again, and I'll catch you all on the next episode.